Hey AIS! For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amy Rosen, and I am the 2018-2019 National President of the American Institute of Architecture Students. And I'm here coming at you live in week one of the 6 and 6 campaign. What this basically is, if you missed the story on Monday, which don't worry, it'll be in the highlights soon, is a really kind of challenging but strategic approach to taking all 6 Aeries in 6 weeks. And I structured this where each week is basically dedicated to one exam. And this is in response to my own personal capacities and memory, as well as in an attempt at isolating each exam so that I can provide you all with exactly what's in each one and tips and tricks for studying, and basically update you on what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and how it goes. I'm planning on being extremely transparent with you all. I will be telling you whether I pass or fail each exam. I will tell you exactly what I've done thus far that week. And I'm only really studying in the evenings so that it's kind of modeled after any typical alumni who is working full-time at a firm and trying to study for the exams at the same time. So first of all, I really want you all to know that this campaign is not structured to be exactly replicable. I don't want you all going out there and trying to do all 6 in 6 weeks. Model them such that you feel comfortable taking your exam, take the things that I'm doing, utilize them, and kind of model them to your own capacities. Personally, I have a short-term photographic memory. What that means is that when I study for something, I can only really remember it after a few days. If I study for something over the course of months, it doesn't really sink in as well. So it's kind of interesting that I'm doing it this way in response to my own studying. If you really need the time to make sure it sinks in, if you want to spend a month on one thing, then take your time with it. This could be 6 in 6 months, for instance. But yeah, so I'm gonna get into some of the how I even got to this stage, because before you can even take an exam, you actually have to go through a few steps. So let's look at them. Hopefully, many of you have already seen this graphic before. This is supplied by Endcard on their website, and it says, "Want to be an architect?" They try to make this diagram as easy and simple to read as possible. This is basically highlighting the 3-step process. In order to become an architect, you have to A, do the education portion, which is an accredited degree of architecture. That can be a Bachelor of Architecture or a Master of Architecture. Then you have to get to the experience stage. The experience stage is it's called AXP, Architectural Experience Program. And that's basically where you have to log all of your hours as you're working at internships or other jobs, and you basically log those to meet the required amount of hours that NCARB has determined would make you ready to be a licensed architect. The examination phase is currently what I'm really trying to tackle and hone in on during this 6 and 6 campaign, and that is where there are 6 different exams, which I'll talk about in a bit, and they each cover a different phase of a typical design process and of basically being an architect. Once you have received your accredited degree, you can basically begin your exams at any point. Some states have different requirements, and I'll get into that in a bit, but experience actually doesn't determine whether or not you can take your exams. You can start it on any point in the process, and so I will show you my AXP hours in a second, and you'll see that I'm actually not finished with them at all, but I'm still trying to tackle all of the exams because you can learn what's on them, and each of these 3 E's touches a different part of architecture, so they're kind of isolated, but they all are synonymous in that they're prepping you to be the best architect you can be. So let's get into some of the details. This is basically my NCARB record. When you actually go into NCARB, you have to log your education. You have to submit your transcript, and when you submit your transcript, NCARB will verify whether or not that's an accredited degree or not. And once it's accredited, it will unlock the exam section of their page. And that will allow you to basically submit your jurisdiction. But which jurisdiction do you want to be in? What state do you want to register in? How do you know what that is? So you can go to the Get Licensed page of NCARB, and they actually have this really handy-dandy tool where if you're curious about the different requirements of different states and you're not sure if you want to register for your home state or where you went to school, you can check this. Me, for instance, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, went to school in Pennsylvania, currently live in DC, and plan to move to New York. So it was a pretty big decision as to which state I wanted to register in. But the fun fact that all of you should know is that once you register for a state, you can actually apply for reciprocity in other states. So it's not binding. Definitely don't feel like the state that you register in is the one and only state you can be an architect in, because you can do multiple states, because there's the potential that you'll be designing for different states at the same time. So when you go into that tool, it's really cool because you can click on the different states. So let's say I wanted to look at California. In there, you'll see that there's actually a bunch of different specificities, and that's because in California, they actually have an additional exam. That's because of earthquakes. They have really high seismic conditions, so they require that you take an additional exam on top of those 6 so that you're prepared for the earthquake conditions in California. I personally tried to actually register in New York originally. When I did this, I was looking through all of this, and I was like, okay, I abide by all of these different conditions. However, not all of the requirements are illustrated on this page. You're definitely going to want to reach out to your local state board and see if they require a form, see if they require a certain fee in order to just register for that jurisdiction. New York, particularly, is one of the hardest states to actually register in because all of your AXP hours have to be under a New York licensed architect. So I was looking at my AXP hours and I was like, oh no, I've had internships in California and Pennsylvania, and I've been working on my AXP for a few years, but none of those hours would count. So instead, I decided to register for Pennsylvania. This state had no online applications, so I basically went into the Endcard page, went to the exam page, which is right there, and all of these exams were not here. It simply had a bar that said, which jurisdiction would you like to register in? And I clicked Pennsylvania, and then I had the opportunity to buy seat credits. Seat credits basically just means that you're buying a ticket to go take a test. So I bought 6 exam seat credits, and I could schedule my exams. You can see the dates of my exams right there. These are all mapped out on our website as well, and you'll be following me along as I do this. You'll notice that my first exam is programming and analysis, and I will be getting into more of that in a little bit. But let's zoom in a little more. So I'm trying to be transparent with you all and show you why I chose programming and analysis to be first. First of all, you'll notice that in my AXP, I've completed 3 of the categories. These categories align exactly with the examinations. So when you're filling out your AXP hours and you're doing work at firms, you're actually doing work that will help you for your AXP and your ARE. So in essence, it's up to you as to whether or not you want to try and get all of your hours done before you take an exam, or whether you want to take the exam and then do your hours. I've heard from many people that there's pros and cons to both approaches. Some people feel that if you actually have that real life experience, that you'll have a better understanding of what they're talking about on the exam, and you'll be able to go in there with confidence. You'll notice that I have 0 hours under construction and evaluation, and not many hours under project planning and design and project development and documentation. So naturally, I'm a little stressed about those 3, but they're right in the middle of my campaign, and you'll watch as I'm going. So when you go to the Endcard website and you go to how do I pass the ARE, you'll notice that they actually supply a lot of different resources for you so that you can actually know what's going to happen and you don't have to go in blind. One of the things that has been in my back pocket for the past 3 days is the ARE 5.0 handbook. This is and this is going to sound a little lame, I apologize, a fun and interactive document. As you're scrolling, the introduction gives you a really brief overview of all 6 of the exams. They go into all of the sections within each exam. They talk about what's in the handbook, and you kind of just get that whole overview. And then, if you decide to pan over here, you'll notice that you can actually click on each exam. So as you're going, you don't actually have to scroll through the PDF, which I found out a little too late. You can just click on the button and jump down. But before we do that, as you're scrolling, when it goes to what is the ARE, you can start to figure out exactly how they're going to test you. What I didn't know is that it's not actually about the what. It's not about memorization. What they're trying to test you on is whether or not you understand and apply the things you're learning and how you can analyze and evaluate a situation. So while you're studying, you definitely want to know all the things and you want to understand all the topics and understand all the terms, but you have to go a step further. and they have this nice handy graphic that shows you that it's somewhere in between remembering and creating. In the past, the architectural registration exam actually had little vignettes where they made you design, and they made you design an entire building right then and there, sitting in that scary room surrounded by strangers. They realized that's not entirely realistic when it comes to analyzing whether or not you're ready to be an architect and whether or not you have the skills necessary. So they kind of zoomed in and thought, okay, understand, apply, analyze, and evaluate. Those 4 sections should be able to determine whether or not somebody is ready to be an architect and is fit to actually provide for the safety, welfare of the public. So when you actually are scrolling through, you can then, I'm going to jump to programming and analysis just because that's the exam I'm currently working on, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I chose this first. There's a bunch of different recommended exams to take first. Some people jump right at the first one, which if you're just going through this little handbook, and as I saw in the comments, it can be referred to as the Bible, practice management is first. Practice management is really zoomed out. It kind of talks about how you operate at a larger scale, and then you kind of zoom a little bit into project management, which is with regards to how do you manage a project? What if you're a higher level employee and you actually have to navigate those things? And then the other 4 are really related to the design process. So there's programming and analysis, project planning and design, project development and documentation, and then construction and evaluation. I chose to do project programming and analysis first because I wanted to just go through the design process and then zoom out, then look at project management and practice management. You can either start with programming and analysis or either project management or practice management. However, be sure that when you're planning the order of your exams and you're deciding when you're going to take them, you're really deliberate about the order, because the info on each exam kind of seeps into the next one. So programming and analysis stuff relates to project planning and design, which relates to project development and documentation, which then relates to construction and evaluation. Practice management and project management are also kind of like a little duo. They work together, so you definitely want to take those 2 in basically consecutively, but they can be isolated from the other 4, and so it's up to you as to whether or not you do those 2 or programming and analysis first. I personally chose programming and analysis first because I wanted to do something that I felt I actually had some expertise in, that was something I felt relatively confident going in as my first exam. Programming analysis is more or less what you learn in school. It talks about context, it talks about building analysis, it talks about how to actually analyze program, how to analyze environmental conditions. And for those of you that know me, my master's was in sustainable design, so I really felt that I knew the environmental side of things, and this one kind of de-stressed me because it was something that I felt I knew more than the other sections. So I went into this, and if you remember looking at my AXP hours, that was actually one that I had completed. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to start this with one of them, I'm going to do programming and analysis. So when you're looking through programming and analysis in the Aerie handbook, they tell you exactly how many items, which are questions. Endcard calls questions on the exam items. They tell you how many items are on each exam, how long that exam will be, and how long your appointment will be. Programming analysis has 95 items. The test duration is 3 hours and 15 minutes, but your appointment duration is 4 hours. And that's because you actually get one 15-minute break that you can take whenever you want, and you actually have to do a few things at the beginning and a few things at the end, little questionnaires and things. So then you kind of zoom out and you look, okay, what's actually in this section? And you can see the percentage of the test items that will be on each section. So even though I kind of did this exam because I felt like I knew the environmental stuff, I learned that it's not the majority. The majority of the exam is really building analysis and programming and site analysis and programming, and then with about a quarter or a fifth of codes and regulations. Codes and regulations can be scary, but if you actually, really you just have to understand the order of the codes and where to find things. You don't have to memorize anything, because when they ask you about them, they will provide you with those codes in the exam room. So then you continue scrolling and they start to get into each objective within each section, and they talk about what's going on. And I'll do a little bit more of that later. They have sample items. They also have maps and things that are referenced to potential test items. So I'm going to talk about how I've been studying this week. Basically, I started studying on Sunday, and I will be finishing studying on Thursday, and I'll be taking my exam on Friday. That means I had 5 days. So I was like, okay, how can I structure this where I feel prepared and I utilize all of the resources available on Black Spectacles? I'm using Black Spectacles as my Aerie prep provider because it's actually Endcard approved, and I felt that they would be able to not only show me what's on it, but they teach you via video lectures. I personally love learning from videos rather than reading a giant book. If you are somebody who really processes information from books, perhaps Black Spectacles isn't for you. Perhaps you want to go with one of the other test prep providers. But if you're like me and you really like just sitting and listening, then you can do the video lectures. You'll notice I've already finished viewing all the video lectures. That's because I consolidated all of those into the beginning of my week so that I can do all that learning and remembering and then spend today and tomorrow really applying, really studying the available flashcards that they have on there that I'll show you in a bit. And then on Thursday night, which is tomorrow, I'll be taking a couple of practice exams and I'll see what's actually going to happen and whether or not I feel ready. And then I'm going in on Friday. So when you go into the video lectures, you will see that they actually have a bunch of videos for each objective. Each objective, there's many objectives within each section. So within the first section, there's objective 1, evaluating site-specific environmental and sociocultural opportunities. Then you go down and they have site-specific environmental constraints, and this is all the environmental stuff. They also have practical applications. These are some fun videos of people in the real world showing you how their projects actually applied the things that you're learning in these videos. They tell you how they used it in their firm and how you could actually use it on the exam. Then when you click on a particular video, you get to meet my dear friend, Mike Newman. I've been getting to know him pretty well this week. Really, he's been my number one friend. I've just been listening to him. He hasn't really been listening to me, but that's the nature of a video. So when you play the video, and I'm going to try and mute this so that you don't actually hear him over me, you can also have the transcript going at the same time. So you can, if you like to watch and read at the same time, you can see that they're highlighting as he's going. And then something that's also fun and interactive, you can click and it'll just jump to that part of the video. Let's say you're reading the transcript while he's talking and you're like, I already know that. I don't need to waste my time here. You can just jump ahead. And that's really fun. You can also change the speed of the video. I've been watching these videos at 1.5 times speed simply because of my time constraint and because I felt he talked a little slow for me. But if you really like when somebody takes their time and illustrates everything, do that. You can also speed it up to 2 times speed if you're that crazy and you just want to like get it in really fast. So do what you want to do, but make sure you're doing it such that you're actually processing the information and listening to what he's saying. Then if you decide, okay, maybe I want to look at this later, you can actually download the lecture slides that he shows you during the video, because periodically he shows you a lecture slide on his screen, and you can download those and study them later. So you'll see I've downloaded the lecture slides for this lecture, and it talks about the main aspects of this division, where it talks about programming, site analysis, zoning code issues, building code issues, different project types, and economic issues. This was the overview introduction. He gave us a table of contents, talks about some terms. This one was really a good intro. It talks about what to expect in environmental conditions and all of that. So I kind of have this PDF of the lecture that I can just study on my own, and if I really want to listen to him again, I can go back to the video. So it's kind of a 2-in-1. It's a book and a video. You can do whatever you want, but make sure you do whatever you feel you need. And then once you've watched all the videos, and keep in mind for this exam, there are, how many hours? It was 18 hours and 8 minutes of videos. So I watched those all in about 2.5 days because I was going at 1.5 speed, studying for 6 hours each day. If you want to study for 2 or 3 hours each day, you do the math. It might take you about 6 days, and you can space those out over a week, over a month, over a couple of months. But yeah, it's pretty doable. This exam, in comparison to the other ones, doesn't have as much content, apparently. I was looking at a couple of the other ones, and they had up to like 36 hours of content, so that'll be fun in the coming weeks. But this one was actually relatively small, and I felt like after going through the videos, I had a pretty good understanding of what was on the exam. And then, oh, he's still talking, fun. Now, tonight and tomorrow, I will be looking through these flashcards. not only can you just flip through the flashcards, go to the next one, really see all the little details and terms, but you can mark them as mastered. And when you mark something as mastered, the program registers that as, okay, you know this, we don't need to make this pop up again, and you can filter the cards based on what you've mastered and what you have not mastered. So it's really efficient. You can just flip through the cards that you don't know, you can flip through the cards you do know if you just want to make sure that you know them, and you can search for things. So if there was a topic that you heard lovely Mike talking about that you want to see again, then you can search there and just play it. And then not only can you do that, you can create your own cards. So if he was talking and you're like, oh my God, that's something I want to know. Like, I learned that a parking spot is pretty much always between 8 and 10 feet by 19 feet. And that if you're doing a parking lot, it's pretty much always 60 feet by whatever 9 times however many spots you're doing. That was a fun fact. I might make a custom card for that. There are some other things that you might make, but otherwise you can just shuffle the deck, you can randomize it, you can reset your mastered and all of that. So it's pretty interactive, pretty easy to use, and it's really awesome that they have all these flashcards. There's about 570 for this exam. And then once you've done all of that, if you feel like you actually know your stuff or you just want to challenge yourself, that's where the practice exams come in. And this is where Black Spectacles really blew me away, because their practice exams are actually exact simulations of the Prometric system that you'll be using when you go to take your exam. So if you start the exam, not only will it be timed, but they'll actually give you that 15-minute break if you want. You'll be able to full screen it so that it's an exact replica of what you'll be doing, and you can take that exam. I have not taken a practice exam yet. To be honest, it's a little intimidating. That's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow night. Since this exam is about 3 hours and 15 minutes, I'm going to try and take 2 practice exams and then jump into the test on Friday. I'm going to try and sleep really a lot tomorrow night because I'm nervous about preparing for it, and they recommend that you get there early. There's also certain stipulations about not wearing jewelry and being really prepared, so make sure I will go over that on Friday. But I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of what the Aeries are, that there's 6 of them. They cover different aspects of the design process and of being an architect, how to actually go about registering for an exam, and yeah, why I chose programming and analysis first. Throughout this evening, I will be posting a few more fun facts about the things I've learned, the tips and tricks for maybe getting through the flashcards or whether or not those are productive. Maybe I want to use the Endcard practice problems in their Aerie 5.0 handbook and other fun resources that are available. So I will stay tuned, and I hope that you learned something. See you later.